Hello and welcome to Tooshka Training, which is part 4 of the Reaper Cookbook. We're going to be covering importing, loading and so on today. We're going to have to blow through this really quick because it's quite a long, involved subject. We're only going to be covering importing and loading media and project files and so on. Everything else we're going to have to cover at a later date. So let's start off with the file menu, open project. You can open projects here like so. I created this test project to show you. Now, some people will double click in their native operating system file explorer, and because Reaper's associated with .rpp, which are Reaper project files, it will open them. Two reasons I advise against this. One, the open project has got these extra options we're going to cover in a moment, and two, because in the preferences here, you have these options for what happens when you double click in your native operating system media explorer, in your native operating systems explorer. They're currently broken. The Reaper developers know about it. I've told them about it. There's no fix coming quickly because they're busy doing something. There's big changes coming in Reaper and they're busy working on that at the moment. So personally, I advise using the open project, mainly because of these extra options. You can open a new project here, open a new project tab. What it'll do is create a new tab here like this. Great option to have, but more importantly for me is the open with effects offline recovery mode, like so. It will bring up this window. The following effects could not be found, blah blah blah, and all your effects will be listed here. Now what it's done is it's made this effect here offline, so no matter how I click it, it's not going to bring up the effect. You have to right click it and then bring the effect back online, like so on. The reason I want to show you this is because 99.99999 times out of 100, if a project is not loading anymore, rather than the project being corrupted, it's normally a dodgy plugin. Using that option, you can offline all the plugins in your application, in your project file in the application, and then when you actually load it up, they'll all be offline. You can go through them one by one, bringing them online, saving, reopening, until you come across the one that's actually a dodgy plugin. Then you've got a choice of deleting it and replacing it with something else, or deleting it when you actually save the project and then reloading it when you reload the project, which is not a great way of working because you lose total recall. However, you can always save a preset for the plugin, and then when you've reloaded the plugin, reload that preset. The reason I've used this particular plugin is because it shows another one of Reaper's bugs that the developers have never got around to fixing. That being, a couple of times people have said to me, oh, my preset drop down list has disappeared in Reaper. It's because your effect is too thin. Drag this over a little bit and the preset drop down is now back there. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be like that. When it's too thin, like so, then it should double the height of this and the preset browser should be below. But this whole thing at the top here is a complete mess in Reaper. It's something the developers need to sort out, whether they ever do. It's one of them things we have to live with in Reaper. I mean, look at this pinned thing here over the text. It's one of them things you have to live with in Reaper. It's a cheap application. It does a hell of a lot, but it is going to have these little issues here and there. Okay. Next thing we want to cover in the file drop down menu is we've covered open project, where you hit new project, create a new project, will give you an empty project like so. Recent projects will give you a recent project list. I only have one in my recent project list because I haven't done much in this particular Reaper. It's my test Reaper for these tutorials. As you can see, it loads that recent project. In your preferences, you have got a way of emptying your recent project list, something we'll cover in a set of videos that are just for the preferences. Next thing we're going to cover is project templates. Now, I've created a test template, and as you can see, it's just loading 4 tracks. Now, the reason project templates are so good is because if you're one of these people who, say for instance, on a regular basis, you start off by creating 16 tracks and setting up the inputs for your drums, with particular input going to a particular input on your interface with a particular microphone, so on and so forth. You can then set that up as a project template, save that, and it will be in your project template drop down here. Reaper comes with a couple built in, which are these RBN templates, which I think are for Rock Band. They're Rock Band templates, so you can actually make a song here, save it, and it'll be perfect for Rock Band. I think you have to save it as a multi-track WAV. Not something I actually take much interest in, to be perfectly honest. Right, that's the file menu covered. Next thing we're going to cover is the insert menu. Now, on my particular Reaper, the insert menu has been renamed and repurposed because I don't use the insert menu and it doesn't interest me. I don't want to come up here to insert things into Reaper, but we're going to cover it in case this is the way you want to work. Like I keep saying, we're going to fit Reaper to the way you work rather than you fit into the way Reaper works. You can insert media file, virtual instrument, new media item, pip, empty item, SIMT, and click source. Right, before we go any further, we're not going to cover virtual instruments, completely separate tutorial. And we're not going to cover pips for now. We're going to come back to that a little bit later in this tutorial. Because there's something we need to do first to work with pips. Pips being a project in project, actually loading a project inside a project in Reaper. We'll cover that more in a moment. All right, so the first thing we'll cover is insert media file. Now, any supported media files will be there. As you can see, it loads that WAV straight in. What I want to do now is remove this track, that insert media file. You know how it works. It just opens up this import file into project window. I don't want to go into it any further. It's a window you'll be used to in your particular ROS. Well, the next thing I'm going to cover is insert new MIDI item. Now, if you noticed, it inserted the new MIDI item right over here. I did that on purpose, simply because I wanted to show that this inserts at the cursor. So we're going to bring the cursor back to the start of the project. I'm going to zoom a little bit here, like so. And we're going to insert a new MIDI item again, like so. Now, if you notice, if I move the cursor to here, like so, and insert new MIDI item, we get the exact same length of MIDI item, but it's now inserted from the cursor here. So if I do it again, like so. Now, the reason I never use this is because the only thing I actually insert on a regular basis is a new empty MIDI item. And if you watch the customized toolbars and menus videos that we did earlier in the series, then you'll see that I already created an insert MIDI here on my right-click context, which is just so much faster for me. Now, one thing I want to cover here quickly, if you notice they're all a default size, I don't tend to insert like this from the edit cursor. I find it not particularly great because you always get a default size. A trick that I learned that I enjoy using is to use a loop here, because I have my loop and time selection linked, which is in your preferences, loop points linked to time selection. That's how I have it. You might want to change that and have your loop points and time selection separate, but I have them linked. And now what that basically means is, because my time selection is this big, when I insert a new MIDI item, it gives me a MIDI item of that length, so I can create custom length MIDI items like so, via the menu or via my right click context. If I do it again there and now, I get nothing, because it's over the top of the original. So what that does is it shows you that it will always use the currently selected track. So if I insert a MIDI item like so, you'll see that I'm using the currently selected track. So we're going to create some tracks here. Double click the input out button there by mistake. I'm going to pick this track and I'm going to insert MIDI item like so, and as you can see, it's inserted it on that track. So that pretty much covers your inserting and how your inserting works. Before we go any further, I just want to show you insert empty item, something I've never used. I flirted with it a little bit when I'm creating items on folder tracks to represent the items within a folder track, something that we're going to cover in our Reaper Extreme series, not for this tutorial. I started to prefer using empty MIDI items. So again, not something I actually use, but it's there if you need it. Insert timecode generator. As you can see, it inserted it at the cursor. That's why it's over there. If you double click it, you get your timecode generator properties up. Again, not something I use very often. Insert click source. I'm a big fan of the metronome, so I don't use the click source that often, but I have used the click source. It's there if you need it. Double click it to open its properties, like so. That pretty much covers our inserting media files. We haven't covered pips yet, which we're going to cover a little bit later because I want to talk about them in a bit more detail. Bearing in mind that anything we do here will work on a pip, but I need to show you how to set pips up first. Next thing we're going to cover is the Media Explorer. Now we're going to have to blow through this again really quick because there's a lot of options. I'm going to right click and I dock my Media Explorer. I always have my Media Explorer docked. I never load it from this menu up here. In fact, I've altered my menu in my main Reaper. It doesn't have any of this stuff because my stuff is there ready on tap. I always have it tabbed here like this because it's so powerful and I'm always using it. First, we'll cover these options here. You've got a play, pause, stop, and repeat button. Your input-output button, which will go stereo, mono, or you can reroute it to various places. If you don't know what reroute is, then you're going to want to go to our install video, and I discuss more about reroute there, and that's and the reroute possibilities. Autoplay. What this does, if we go to my samples folder here, I'm just going to open one of these folders like so. Now, if we've got multiple media files, I won't say samples, I'll say media files because it can be any type of media. If you've got autoplay clicked, when you click on one, it will start playing like so, rather than you having to hit the play button. If you have autoplay off, you can actually click around how you need to, and you'll have to press play to get it to play. Start on bar is a very powerful thing. If you've got a project playing up here and you use start on bar, if you've got a loop and you click it, it will automatically start playing the loop at the start of the next bar after you've hit play. So it will be perfectly in sync with the project that's playing. However, to have it perfectly in sync, you need to use this drop down. If you've got tempo match off, it will play the original sample as that sample is. If you've got tempo match on, it will match the tempo of this sample to the project that's playing. So your tempo that is actually set in your BPM here, it will try and change the tempo of the sample to fit that, and with your start on bar as well, it'll try and synchronize it completely to the project playback. Great if you work with loops a lot. I do. We use a lot of loops underneath our real drum tracks and so on. Brilliant for that. Next thing here is pitch. You can actually change the pitch of the sample that you're previewing. It's not something I use very often, but there you go. And you've got your volume slider here as well. One thing with a volume, when you're previewing against the project that's playing, try and keep the volume down a little. You'll tend to find that it's easier to work out if a sample is working against the project that's playing if it's not that loud. You can always turn the volume up and set the volume however you want in the project anyway. That has nothing to do with the project. This is just for previewing. Before we move on, let's just go back to this tempo match. You've got tempo match and tempo match on, which we covered. Sometimes when you've got a loop, even if it's a perfect loop, it will run at double speed or half speed. Just something that happens. You can preview at half the speed and double the speed. That will fix those issues. Like I say, we've got to blow through this really quick, so if I step past something and go back to it, you're going to have to get used to it. Another thing we've got here as well is you can select in your actual peak file like so, and then you can just drag, and that will actually just bring what you've selected here up to your timeline. You can drag directly here, and then it's still only bringing the selection. What you want to do is unselect this, and there when you drag and drop, it will actually drag the whole file. And if you notice, because I've got tempo match on, it's actually made the loop exactly to measures here. which is perfect if you're working with loops. However, if you're working with one shots or long pieces of audio, you may want to turn start on bar off. You may want to turn tempo match off, like so. Depends what you're working with. If there's BPM info built into the WAV file, it will use the BPM info in the WAV file, because a WAV file does actually have a BPM meta tag. So these may actually have BPMs built into them, and it will use those BPMs. Right, so we've covered these things now. We've still got plenty more options to cover. One of them is if I right click on a folder in my Explorer, I can add to the shortcut list, and now this folder here is now my shortcut list here. Another thing, you'll be used to the actual way the Explorer works from Explorers in your operating system. They work very similar way. That's your up button. You've got my computer here, my documents, track templates, which is track templates for here, for inserting track templates, which is something we'll cover at a later date on a different tutorial. Project directory. Because I haven't actually saved this project yet, which would create a project directory for me via the prefs that I have set. Again, we'll cover the prefs in a separate set of tutorials. It's taken me directly to my Reaper media folder and my documents folder, and that's a default folder if you haven't set a project tempo, a project folder, sorry. Now, if you set a project folder, it won't go to this. It will go to the project folder for this particular folder. Which is great. You'll have all your media files contained there within that folder. Like I say, I've got to blow through this really quick. That's why I haven't actually set up a project folder and showed you it. We might show you it on the save one. You can actually change your list in here to details and list. I prefer list because I can get more on screen. Right, the next things we're going to cover is creating a new database. You can create a new database here, like so. I'll just call this test, and you can actually add a project path, a path to this. Again, this is not something I actually found useful in the slightest bit, to be honest. I don't rate this feature at all. I just prefer, I don't like the way it looks. I just prefer using the normal Explorer. Basically what it allows you to do is add all these paths into a single structure. Again, you may love it. I don't. Something I will never use. If you do, then good for you. It's not something I'll use. I'm not going to cover it any further. Right click on your tab, or if you've got it undocked, you can right click on the top bar. Your default action here, it's split into 3, and the reason it's split into 3 is because these are combined. So you choose one of these, it'll work with this one and it'll work with this one. I have insert media on my double click, so when I double click a particular media file, it inserts it onto into the project. It inserts it on a new track, because for me, 9 times out of 10 I'll have the wrong track selected, and then it'll insert it over a media file that already exists. So I have insert on new track just to cover my own stupidity. And open projects in new tab, which basically, if you double click on a project file in your Media Explorer, it will create a new tab, like we showed earlier with the open project in new tab via the new file window. Or you can insert project as media. Again, something that we're going to cover a little bit later with pips. These pretty much self-explanatory, so we're not going to cover them any further. Preserve pitch when tempo matching is something that I never have ticked, because I use a lot of drum-based material. I don't want to preserve the pitch when I have got it synchronized with the project that's playing. Might be something that you use very, very often. It's something that I would prefer to have a tick box here for, but we don't. Always show waveform peaks for selected media. Not something I've ever bothered with. Display preview position in tenths of seconds. Again, not something that interests me. You can mess with these features. You now know where they are. Auto stop preview after added media. This is something that is important in my book. Once the media is inserted into the project, then it stops previewing. It'll stop playing. Auto advance to next file after preview. Now, this is something, again, that for me should have a tick box directly on the media player, because it's a very powerful thing, but something that you may want to turn off and on. If you have repeat turned off and you have a list of WAV files, if you click on one, like so, when it finishes, it will automatically move to the next one, as you can see it doing there. However, if you have repeat on, like so, when it's finished playing, it will play again. It will loop over. Now, I prefer this technique, and the reason I prefer this technique is because when I'm listening to something in context of the project, I want to hear it looped over a few times. If it's a single loop or a two bar loop or whatever, I want to hear it in context over the project. Now, to advance, when using that technique, you can use your arrow up and down keys. Moving the arrow down will move to the next sample, like so, and moving it up will move to the previous, like so. So for me, I actually prefer the arrow keys when I'm doing that. I think also your arrow key right will actually start play, and your arrow key left will stop play. So they're the way I prefer to do that. However, I do like this feature if I'm busy doing something else and I want to have a load of loops going against the project running. And then while you're doing something else, every now and again, you'll turn around and think, oh, that fits perfectly. So you choose that file. It's a good feature to have. Preview Reaper projects. What this will allow you to do is, if you've actually got a project file here in your Media Explorer, it will treat it as any other media. So when you click on it, it will actually play it in context against the arrangement that's already playing. So if you've got autoplay, start on bar, tempo match, and so on set to on, it will tempo match it to the current project. Now it will render it as a WAV first, I think, so it runs pretty quick. It's pretty good, and it's great when you're working with pips. Again, we're going to cover pips in a moment. Use Windows Explorer for browse, and if you have that ticked, then it uses the standard Windows Explorer, and you've got the standard Windows right-click context. I don't like it because I like to have my my Windows set up with default colors and everything. I don't really mess with Windows themes. I tend to have them on classic, so it runs as fast as possible. And with that, I can actually, on my particular Reaper, I've set the theme so that this is black and the text is actually light gray. So I prefer to use the native Reaper Explorer. And you've got that right-click context, and you've got this right-click context here. I'm going to turn off autoplay quickly just so I can show you this right-click context. Insert into project. Insert at time selection is grayed out because I haven't got a time selection selected. Like so. Insert into project on a new track. Insert as taken selected items. Uses media source for selected items. Uses media source for selected items. Stretch loop to fit. Again, these are things I never use. They're quite self-explanatory. Insert a time selection will enter at the time selection. Insert into project on a new track will insert onto a new track. As a take in selected items will basically insert as a new take on that. Like so. So as you can see, there's multiple takes now that you can select between. There'll be a tutorial on takes later on. Uses a media source for selected items. If you do that, it'll actually change the item that you're already working on. Uses media source for selected item and stretch loop to fit. Will actually do the same thing, but it'll make sure that the loop is actually the right size for the item that's currently selected, or preview. Again, these are things I don't use very often, but they're there if you need them. The last few things to cover are on this context menu. Unload current preview was something that I think should be grouped with this, because I don't find it particularly useful when using the native Explorer. It was great to unload the current preview media when I wanted to right click and delete via the Windows Explorer. We haven't got right click and delete via the native Explorer, so I don't actually use current and low current preview media. You may. Show all files will show all files even if they're not loadable. As you can see, I'm now showing rear peaks in a .zpa file there, so I don't tend to have that ticked. Add current folders to shortcut list we've already covered. Show action list, which will show you the action list just for the Media Explorer. I'm not going to cover all those actions. You can look into them yourself. Dock Media Explorer we've already seen, and close window is quite self-explanatory. Okay, let's cover pips, which is a project in project, PIP. The first thing we need to do is we need to go to Show Reaper Resource Path. We're going to open the reaper.ini file, which is there. Now, in your reaper.ini file, if you haven't already set this up, you're probably not going to have an entry pip_en equal 1, which would be pip enable. 1 being yes. You might have it and it might be 0. 0 equaling no. If you haven't got the pip_en entry, you can actually just add that in yourself, which will be pip_en equals 1. Add that into your reaper.ini file and you will have pip support now in Reaper. The last thing you need to know about pips in terms of why they're not enabled by default is because they're unsupported. They're an unfinished feature according to the developers, and I have to agree there's a few things that need to be added to make them completely usable in real terms, but you know, they are still useful. They are still useful. And I'll show you a quick example of a pip now. If we take, say, a breakbeat like so, I'm going to leave autoplay switched off because I know it's going to drag in. It's going to make it at the right tempo like so. I'm just going to open it out a bit. And I'm just going to make a quick chop on this beat like this. Like I say, I'm just going to do it very, very quickly, just as an example. Right, I've done a quick chop on that breakbeat now, like that. Normally, you would have to render that as a new loop, but rather than render that as a new loop, I can save that as a pip, which is just basically a complete project, just to doubly show exactly what I'm talking about here. I'm going to just bring in an extra drum sound off a different sample, like so, and I'm just going to put a couple of those in as well. And now we're going to save this. You go to your save project as, in my Tooshka tutorials folder, just because it's for this tutorial, I'm just going to save this as beat_loop_pip, like so. Now, we're not going to cover the actual saving options here because that's going to be a separate video, but I'm going to save that quickly like that. And now I'm going to find my Tooshka tutorials folder here like this, and as you can see, I've now got this beat_loop_pip.rpp available in the actual Media Explorer. So I'm going to create a new project, and if I click on this, I haven't actually got autoplay ticked, so I'm going to have to click play as well. For some reason it's not playing. I think I may have to actually set the prefs for that. Yeah, preview Reaper projects.rpp, which we discussed earlier. So now it'll actually preview it. And it's actually showing you the peak file as well. And what I can actually do here now is if I drag this in, you'll actually see that it'll ask me if I want to insert project as a media item, open the project, or open the project in a new tab. So I just insert project as new media item, and now this here, even though it looks like a standard media file, is actually a complete project that you can do what you would normally do. Say I wanted to alt and drag to change the length of it. I can do that to stretch the length of it, I should say. I can slice it and do some repeats if I wanted to, using control drag there. But if I click on it, double click on it, you'll see it opens a new tab at the top here, and it has opened the original project in the new tab. So if I actually I delete this here and I delete that there, if I close that now and save again, I've actually just changed that project. As you can see, I'll just delete these quickly. And as you can see, where I've deleted those items, it's actually changed the project entirely. So that's how you use pips. They're very useful for doing things like this. Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have implode explode actions. Part of the thing that's missing with pips. You can't save pips inside the host project. So when you save a pip, you always need to save it as its own project. You can't, if I was to create an entire project here with this pip and a load of samples and so on, if I then deleted the original pip off the hard drive, the actual main project will no longer work. You need to keep that in mind, because these are hosted projects. They don't save natively within the actual main project, which again is one of the things that's missing that makes these an extremely useful tool. They're still usable as they are, and the things where I've mentioned earlier about new pip sub project and so on. These are all relevant now that you know how to use pips, and now that you've enabled them in your repo.ini file. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. We'll see you on the next one, which will probably be saving projects. See you soon.